Welcome to the Road to Legalization. This is episode number 3, I think. My name is Mike Shue. Joining me today for the conversation is Lilith Asteroth, director, one of the directors of MassCann. Over here, director, or I should say a clerk. You're an officer for MassCann. Kathryn Rifkin, thank you for joining us. And our regular guest, Chris Foye, who is the art and music director of the Boston Freedom Rally. Thank you very much for joining us, folks.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And I want to start off with Boston Mayor Marty Walsh's fierce public proclamation, what I'd like to call it, saying that he is, and I guess I'm paraphrasing here, he is dead set against having medical marijuana dispensaries in the city of Boston. And he's always been against that. Now, he was speaking to a very small crowd that I guess were also big supporters of that, who shared his belief in that. Could he have been, do you think, pandering to that particular crowd, or what do you think? Do you think this is something that you guys have to look forward to, that there's no easing up with Marty Walsh?
I think that he definitely let his position be known, and I think that's great. That's a great opinion that he has, but the people voted, and the majority of the state wants legalization, but right now we're talking about medical, the patients need their meds, Why is Marty Walsh going to take his own personal opinion and stand in front of, thousands of patients that need this right now? And, I think the policies that he's trying to push for longer, happy hour and longer last calls, really shows his hypocritical, stance on the whole thing. How can you support more drunk driving? How can you support more drunken, disorderly conduct? That's what's going to come of a policy like that. Don't get me wrong, I do support, a later nightlife, and I do support those things, but how can you support one and not the other, and be so adamant about that and, solid in your stance? It's just mind-blowing to me. And he really doesn't seem to understand his constituents and what they want.
I noticed when I was reading the article that someone in I think it was a congregation, I think it was a church in Dorchester, someone in the congregation stood up and said, well, how do we address the violence? And I wish somebody was able to stand up and say, the violence comes from prohibition. The violence is not in the weed. It's a calming weed. It brings you back to homeostasis. It relieves stress and anxiety. It does not. And you do not become boisterous and belligerent and out of control on weed.
There's no blacking out when you smoke cannabis either.
That's right. So, but the violence comes in the desperation of people trying to get their weed or their medicine. Once you restrict a supply, basic economics takes over, and when you take a commodity out of the legal system, and you have grievances to address, you can't take them to court. So you address your grievances by violence. It comes from prohibition, and he didn't tease that out when the person was asking the question.
He also gave, and this is something we haven't touched on yet in this video podcast, but he also gave the very familiar excuse of, well, marijuana is a gateway drug, and I've seen a lot of my friends start with marijuana and end up on harder stuff.
That's coalition instead of correlation, not causation. People have mother's milk, and they go on to, so it wasn't a valid argument.
I try to, when it comes to gateway drug, that stance, I try to actually acknowledge the fact that, marijuana is the first, young people's first real experience with, drugs, you want to call them. And the problems and the credence that is given to the gateway drug theory stem from the prohibition itself. One thing that happens when you smoke marijuana is you either say, this isn't for me, and you don't do it, or you smoke it and you're like, everything I've been told is a lie.
That's right.
And it's and in that moment, I've identified in a lot of young people and in myself the instant questioning of a lot more things.
You have to be straight with your kids.
Now, because of prohibition, and because of your own personal experience with marijuana, you have now opened your own door to a bigger world, and you don't even know it. You're questioning things. What was that? What have I been told that's a lie? What have I been told that's real? And you find yourself, when having to deal with a black market and not a legitimized industry, you find yourself among other people that you might not want to be around. You find yourself you find other drugs available to you when you have to go to your drug dealer. And that ingrained thought that you got in your head, I was lied to, might lead you to try other things. And it might lead you to try cocaine. It might lead you to try heroin. It might lead you to try OxyContins.
What are you saying? That just because it's available when you go to buy marijuana, that may lead you to...
It puts you in the scenario where
it's available. So it's the availability? You don't think it's because people just say, well, I want to get higher than this. Or I want to get a different high from this.
I think at first, because of the black market industry and the where you have to go to get this plant, this medicine, it puts you in circles that you don't want to be in, and it leaves you susceptible to trying these other drugs. And personal responsibility is a huge thing, but I think in a legitimized industry, the gateway drug theory just fizzles away.
And if you study a lot of medicine, you can see that it actually might turn out to be an exit drug. People are going to come off of unhealthy drugs onto cannabis, and that's going to help people just get off of and get healthier.
Do you know why alcohol is not considered a gateway drug? Is because you can go to the store and buy it. If you could go to the store and buy marijuana, you wouldn't. Other drugs wouldn't even really be on your radar.
Well, I don't know.
I feel that.
I have to disagree with you there, because I think that alcohol inhibits your decision making, much like marijuana does, because what you're doing is you're altering your mind. And so I feel that when you're under the influence of either, your decision making is influenced by that. So you may not be making the same decisions you make when you're not under the influence of those drugs. So I think as someone that may have been drinking may want to say, oh, I'm going to try heroin, or I want to do something. So I don't know if it's about like an availability thing, and I don't think you can say that alcohol's not a gateway drug because it's sold in stores.
I absolutely believe that it is. I absolutely believe alcohol is a gateway drug. But why isn't that really thrown into the argument when we're talking about gateway drugs? Why is alcohol available if it's so obviously a gateway drug and so obviously causes all these social problems? But we're stuck on the issue of marijuana and how it's a gateway drug. I think like I said, I think most of the issues and the credences that go to the gateway drug theory kind of fizzle away when you legitimize it and you put it into a legitimate industry.
When there's money being made on it.
That's a
right. I mean, that's probably what you're talking about, is that there's millions and billions of dollars made on alcohol. So why would there be a huge push to? There's too much money involved. Kind of like when we were talking about in other episodes here, why the medical marijuana dispensary licensing process is getting so messed up, and I think it's because they're realizing that there's a lot of money involved.
Right. Very true, very true.
The real gateway drug is money. That's what I'm saying.
There you go.
I'm sorry, were you going to
I just wanted to say, I wanted to just give my opinion on the whole gateway drug thing. I feel like people who want to try things like cocaine or heroin, they're going to want to try them anyway. Those types of people are probably looking for an escape. People who like to drink a lot are usually trying to either to escape something, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. And so I feel like if people want to try harder drugs, they're going to do it anyway, regardless if marijuana is the first drug that they try. I mean, I definitely can see the argument that since marijuana is the most easily and readily available in most places, some kids might be like, oh, that was great, now let's see what else I can get a high on. But the people I know who smoke cannabis, they don't like harder drugs. And I'm sort of in the same boat with that. And I don't really like to drink either. I feel like a lot of I mean, I've read studies before that have likened alcohol dependency to cocaine dependency. They're sort of linked like that. People who are more likely to be alcoholics are more likely to become addicted to things like cocaine.
So it's the addictive personality.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what it is, they're just looking for something to latch onto.
Right. And I mean, I definitely have known my fair share of people that will just try anything that they can get their hands on because they just don't want to be sober. You know, they're just trying to escape their own reality so badly. And I really don't think that that's most people, you know.
It'd be nice if this whole drug use were in a medical setting instead of a punitive, you know, if you're caught, you go to jail setting. Because if you see somebody who's in trouble, you'd rather be able to call the doctor and get them to a hospital or something without jeopardizing their legal status or their job.
I think the perfect example is Portugal's policy of, you know, across-the-board decriminalization. And it's been on the books that way for over 12 years now, I think. And they've had enough time to really have a, you know, understand how the policy like that has changed their, you know, the way they live. You know, they have their problems over there, but, you know, the drug problem has vastly diminished. Right off the bat of decriminalizing all drugs, and I mean, you know, heroin, cocaine, they treat the user as a patient and not a criminal.
Right.
And
big difference.
Over time, you know, these people, there's always going to be the people that just don't want to rehabilitate. You know, sadly, whatever reasons, you know, they just can't get their stuff together. But in Portugal, the drug user, instead of going to jail, instead of being stigmatized, instead of losing social securities like grants and, you know, whatever, because of the classification of criminal or even, you know, felon, you lose personal respect, you lose social connections, social securities, you get stigmatized in your community and by the Corey check that needs serious reform. And in Portugal, like I said, they treat you like a patient. So these people are rehabilitating. A vast number of them are rehabilitating and becoming productive members of society. And they get their heads out of their asses and they don't have these mistake years, you know, haunting them for the rest of their life.
Yeah, why would punishment be so much worse than the substance itself? Unless you're really into being a punishment-centric society. It doesn't make sense at all.
There's no money in rehabilitation, I think, is the thing. You know,
we've got a prison for profit, and all the rehabs are for profit. And if they just would let go of that, you're right. There'd be a lot of people out of work.
Again, it comes back to money.
Yes,
it comes back to who's making money on what.
The status quo is very profitable for whoever's in power.
Deep Throat was right all along. Follow the money.
Exactly.
Right. Well, then let's move on and talk about medicinal marijuana and touch on the movement to let veterans, and is it just veterans or is it also active members, to use medicinal marijuana for PTSD?
I mean, when you look at the veterans issue and, you know, PTSD, like when you're talking about PTSD, everybody thinks of veterans, you know, but first off, I want to say, like, anybody that has dealt with, you know, some type of, you know, trauma in their lives could have PTSD. But, you know, what's really bringing the argument to the forefront is the veterans aspect of it. And the veterans are identifying the fact that they don't want the pills that the VA and the pharmaceutical companies are giving them. They're vocally saying, we want an alternative. And it's not really coming from the active duty community because they can't smoke it. It jeopardizes their job.
Because it's still federally
it's still federally you know, legal. And
right.
When I was in the military, we had to go through piss tests once a month. The entire company, 100%. You know, you show up, your phone rings, time to go do a piss
And what
test.
was the punishment if they found marijuana in your system?
If you found marijuana in your system, you would be subjected to UCMJ action, Uniform Code of Military Justice, where it could be anything from a slap on the wrist because your unit doesn't want to push the subject, or it could be you're getting kicked out of the military. You're going to military jail. You know, it's real. The spectrum of what could happen is very vast, and so the push, I don't feel, is coming from active duty directly, because they're afraid to put themselves out there. I have military guys that I served with that, you know, hit me up on, you know, in private and that thank you for doing this. You know, this is something I can't vocally come out and say I support, but you know, you're doing it for us, and you know, that probably means the world to me. More, the only thing that means more to me than that is when parents hit you up and they say I've been dealing with this stuff with my kids or whatnot. But you know, what the retired veterans are doing, they're the ones pushing this. The veterans that have been self-medicating for years are the ones that are pushing this, because they identify the fact that alcohol is ruining their lives if that's what they're self-medicating with. They identify the fact that the Ambien, that the Klonopins, that, you know, the Xanax, whatever the VA wants to give you, they're going to give you a nice big, you know, bottles worth of pills, and they're going to say, try this. If it makes you want to kill yourself, come back and we'll try something else.
Right.
You know, try this. This is the new one. I used to play a game where I would pay attention to the newest drug on the market, and I'd go in and be like, this is what they're going to push on us this week because it just came out. And they totally would, you know. They'd be like, oh, we're going to try this week. And it's like...
So I was diagnosed with post-traumatic hypervigilance. And
what is that exactly?
Well, it's a post-traumatic syndrome, but I presented by being very noticed what's going on in my environment very carefully, making sure that the sounds were friendly sounds. But, and I was on these psych meds for 15 years and not functioning very well. I would just stay home and turn blue. So it wasn't until the vets were coming back from Iraq after their 8th or 10th deployment, saying that these meds, and that they listed the ones I was taking, these meds, we can't function. We can only function. And I said, oh, really? And they said, we can only function on cannabis. And I said, oh, really? Because when I was a hippie a few years ago, I used to smoke. So I said, so I sent away to Amsterdam for seeds. I started to grow. As soon as it came in, I cold turkey my psych meds. So and then I said, and it was day and night. It was like my creativity came back. Mm-hmm. So I said, I have to be active in getting this legalized. I'm not gonna put up with being treated like a criminal. So that's how I joined MassCann.
How long have you been self-medicating with marijuana?
Since '09. So, but you know, I took a hiatus because I got married and started a family. And they say if you're going to be, you know, in the family way, you have to have absolutely no drugs in your system whatsoever. It's only now that I've gone back and started researching the endocannabinoid regulatory system that I see that maybe cannabis is actually a supplement that our body needs for its functioning.
And where does that information come from?
It comes from the medical community. Actually it came from Israel. There was a doctor named Raphael Meshulam who back in the 60s was wondering how does THC work? You know, how does it work? And right when the U.S. was banned, it was ramping up the war on drugs, which meant you could not do research. So the research was being done overseas. So the first thing you do is in Western medicine is you identify a component in a plant, and then you try to synthesize it and make a medicine that you can sell in pill form, and that's Marinol. He went back with his...
Now, the Marinol, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh.
Marinol is, you can take that, but it doesn't give you the same effect
It's
as...
100% THC.
Okay, so do you get the same effect?
I've never taken it. So.
Oh, okay.
I've heard that it's not the same effects. It's more like
it's like a synthetic
body
right.
feel century. But I've never taken it
Yeah,
myself.
Okay.
but it's a synthetic.
So it's not like eating it or smoking it?
No, it's a different
Right,
feel.
okay.
Okay. So the grad students went back and they said, well, how does it work in the human body? And they found receptors. They found that all vertebrates, and some higher invertebrates, but all vertebrates, including humans, have an that means endogenous, within your own body, endocannabinoid regulatory system. That means the humans have 2 cannabinoids that it makes. And one works on the involuntary nervous system and one on the involuntary nervous system. But what it does, it forms a feedback loop for things that with it's like an on-off switch. It's the off switch. So there may be adrenaline is the on switch for fight or flight, but you have to have the off switch that says, okay, enough, you can stop and rest now. So that brings you, if you're stuck out there in stress, a stress reaction, and you can't come back down to rest, that's post-traumatic stress syndrome. So if you have an inflammation response and you're stuck out there in a chronic inflammation response with no off switch, there's a lot of diseases that are a chronic inflammation. So if you have to have the off switch that says, okay, stop that response, come back down to homeostasis and rest, permission to rest, stand down.
So there's something inside of our bodies that's already
that does
already
this.
there to adapt.
And phytocannabinoids, phyto from a plant, is like the perfect supplement to our own. And I have a suspicion that, so there's the on part and the off part. The on part, evolution, if we believe in evolution, is favored because that got you out of the way of danger. That started the process of healing or something. And the part that said, okay, you can sit around Zen, got kind of neglected in evolution. So that's the weaker part of the two parts response system. So we need a supplement. And this plant has been selected throughout humankind's conscious history. You select the seeds from a good plant and you plant them again. That means you're constantly selecting for a good plant. And they didn't do this, well, we're just going to have a CBD strain because, oh my God, we've got to protect the children. They had the whole plant that was good for people from teething on upward. And it's amazing how just the fact that it's the off switch you can rest, how that brings down Parkinson's and convulsions and inflammations and stress. It's
and like say
profound.
Stuff like for multiple sclerosis.
All that stuff.
Right, because I know a
all
couple
that
people who are using it for multiple sclerosis.
Right. Now we've said, Western medicine says you have to have a specific pharmaceutical for a specific and for a specific disease. That's how we target things. So how can you have one plant that addresses everything? But you have to go back and understand the process of how the human body works and find that it's a feedback loop. It's a loop that says, okay, enough. You can stop.
I think the biggest thing is that just baffles me is if you watch the process of prescribing medicine, the doctor, like I said, here, try this and see how it works, and then if that doesn't work, we'll try this, we'll try that. Why isn't marijuana allowed to just try it? Like, see if it works for you.
As a matter of fact, that it's called what is it? Anecdotal evidence. So they say there's mountains of anecdotal evidence. There's been anecdotal evidence for millennia, but that's not good enough. We have to have a trial, but we can't have a trial because the DEA says no.
Right, because it's illegal.
Right.
Right.
Well, the petition on is it whitehouse.gov right now to reschedule marijuana from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, so we can actually do the testing that they're saying there's no testing for. And they're caught in this little, like you say, they're caught in this loop of bureaucracy right now. It's like, we can't prescribe it, or we won't co-sign it because there's no testing. But we can't test it because it's illegal.
So it's a catch-22.
Yeah, we can't test it because it's illegal. And it's ridiculous. You need to go on whitehouse.gov and sign the petition to get marijuana rescheduled from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2 drug.
But, that could be like a Box Canyon trap where, okay, we're going to try to get the scheduling done, when we're going to say, no, respect the fact that there is anecdotal evidence, and nobody has to have anecdotal evidence for milk or eggs, because millennia has been using it safely for all this time. Same thing with weed. We've been using weed very safely all this time, and I'll tell you why it's safe, and there's no fatalities. There are no cannabinoid receptors on the medulla oblongata. And the medulla oblongata is where the breathing and heart rate are controlled. So it never affects your breathing and heart rate. You never die.
What about, I can understand if you're eating it, but what about when you're smoking it? Doesn't that damage your lungs?
Actually, no.
So taking in smoke from smoking marijuana does not damage your lungs?
The cannabinoids are offsetting the damage from the smoke.
I think I mean, there's obviously
If, you,
not
if
a lot
your
of
lungs are
testing on this.
if your lungs are compromised, it's better to vape. But people do not get cancer from smoking cannabis.
There's never been a case of anyone.
Okay, here's the cancer thing. Like I said, it's the on switch for stress or the on switch for inflammation. Well, there's an on switch in a cell that says replicate. But then the off switch has to come along and say, okay, replicate. You replicated once. It's time to stop replicating and then proceed with your lifespan and die. It's when you don't have that off switch, the cell keeps replicating out of control, and that's cancer.
I don't know. I've definitely hurt my throat before taking too hot of a hit on something, and that's why I decided to make the switch over to vaporizing primarily and doing a little having a little more edibles instead, because for the longer lasting effects, because one of the differences between smoking and vaporizing is that the vaporizing hits you a completely different way. It's better for people who have kind of like chronic pain and stuff like that. It's going to give you more of a body high. So that's where the edibles come in, because they sort of activate you a little bit more. That it has a different effect on you. But you know, I'm not gonna go around and tell people that, oh, smoking is totally healthy for you. You know, I think that's a little silly, but I think that vaporizing is a completely safe option, and that's why I find it really ridiculous that this law that we have going on right now, that you can get fined just for vaporizing in the park, you know, on the basis that it might cause secondhand exposure to somebody else. It's ridiculous. It's impossible. It just wouldn't be possible. So they're clearly targeting us when they put out this law, and I'm
big silly.
They're not even enforcing it right now.
They're being
that's
silly.
that's what I've found too. We've gone out a
Right.
few times on 420, just a few of us, and the park rangers will come up and say, "Hey guys, just so you know, this law is in place now," and we're like, "Okay," and that's it. That's all that's been happening so far. But I'm interested to see how that law ends up, because I just, you know,
Or
vaporizing
how it
is-
specifically affects the Freedom Rally.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Right.
we're paying attention. You know, we're seeing that we're filming. We're out there. We're about in the the commons of just trying to see what the police are doing. The rangers, you know, are they enforcing this law? And they're really not. You know, it's gonna be a tool to just, you know, mess with us, really. And we're taking note now, and we'll see what comes of it in September. But I just definitely wanted to comment too, is there's definitely better ways to intake, you know, besides smoking.
It's the heat.
That's really
will
the heat.
help hurt you. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a singer, so for me, if I burn my throat, that's bad news. That was sort of the main thing that pushed me into doing the vaporizing. And I'm not going to say that vaporizing is foolproof either, because if, you know, usually the little battery pack gets really hot, and if you wait too long to inhale it, it's also going to be hot. So you can definitely still cough and burn yourself on a vaporizer, but it doesn't happen anywhere nearly as much. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody in this room that smokes cannabis that has never taken a hit that has caused like tears to form in their eyes, you know what I mean? And just after one particularly bad incident of that last year, where I was coughing and I had like tears down my face, I'm like, I'm never doing this to my throat again. You know, this is something that I need to take care of. And since then, it's been a little difficult, because most people still smoke primarily, so it can be tough sometimes to abstain. But you know, they make all kinds of neat little portable vaporizers now that make it a lot easier. So
Because it's a social activity.
Well,
Yes.
see, I consider it to be the same thing in that sense as having a drink. You know, because I don't use it medicinally. I use it socially, or I use it to relax, just like if I was to go home and pour myself a glass of whiskey or have a beer.
Is that not medicinal?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Oh, yeah, and
There
so
you
I
go.
consider it the same thing, and that's why when I brought it up earlier, you know, you're altering your mind.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, you can take it out of the stress mode and go into the relaxed mode.
Right.
I know when I come home from Boston, I have to stop the Boston driving mode and get
Yes.
into my small town
Right.
driving mode.
I call it
That's
the Death Race 2000 mode. Yeah, I know exactly what you're
I
talking
can't
Yes, I'm
even
altering
drive
my
in Boston
mind.
myself.
I'm
Yeah.
altering my mind.
Yeah, you need to self-medicate
Oh, yeah.
after the Mass Pike for an hour and a half. Yeah.
You need to ask yourself, you know, what you're comfortable with, you know, compromising your mental state. You know, like I know a lot of people that don't drink because they don't like giving up that self-control. And I know a lot of people that don't do certain meds because it made them not feel like they were in control. I know
or makes them feel like they're not even human anymore.
Yeah, it just melts you away, the personality away. Like you need your ups and you need your lows. You need to be able to regulate yourself. And I think for me, marijuana personally, that's the level of personal. I'm comfortable with altering my state of mind. I'm not going to say I don't drink, but that's too much of compromising my state of mind. Marijuana is what's good for me, and they're not having the choice to decide is the most important.
Right, and you know what? Pills work for some people.
If they're happy with it, fine.
Yeah,
but they shouldn't try to.
But you should have the
Right.
choice.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, really.
That's totally what it's about.
The freedom of choice.
Right.
And I forget who did. It was WebMD and someone else who did the most recent survey of 1,500 doctors, and 67% of them said that marijuana should be a choice.
And when you think of it, planting it, going out in the sunshine, and putting a seed in the Mother Earth, and putting some water on it, and letting it grow, that's the most fundamental relationship a person has with Earth.
Right. It's not coming from something synthesized in a lab or a monkey bladder or
even the actual act, like she's saying, of growing it. It's therapeutic in its own. You're creating and you're growing and you're maintaining it, and
you're forming a relationship.
Yeah, it's very symbiotic, and it's very you get so much out of what you put in. There's like you watch growers; they take so much pride in their
There's a beautiful
their crop,
plant,
and it's even that, like, growing it in itself is just therapeutic. Not the smoking is just a fun byproduct.
Right.
At least for me.
All right. Well, we have to wrap it up here, but. For some of the stuff you were talking about, where can people go
to
look up?
PubMed.gov.
Okay.
And in the search field, put in cannabinoids, put in endocannabinoids, put in endocannabinoids and muscular dystrophy. Put in anything you want, and there are thousands of papers. And then here's the killer part. Look at the date. Some of these are a decade or old, years and years old. And this foolishness still exists. So when they say there hasn't been any tests done, go to PubMed.gov and read all the clinical trials.
And as far as keeping up to date on the progress of medicinal marijuana dispensaries, the push to legalization in 2016, where's a website that people can go to for that?
Do we have Bay State?
And what is that?
Ours is MassCann.org. We also have a large Facebook presence, which we post on numerous times every day. We also have posted the petition that you were talking about, and we're going to repost that periodically so that it's easy to find. We generally are really good at reposting all the information that is coming, so definitely just keep locked on our page, and feel free to do your own research as well. Follow the links and see where they take you.
And we're going to get signatures for PPQs too. That's another subject coming up.
Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
We'll have some of the guys from Bay State Repeal coming in to talk about how they're going to be pushing, what it takes to legalize in Massachusetts.
This is the last best fight. We all have to just buckle down for the next 3 years, 2 or 3 years, get this legalized, and we'll be happy.
Awesome. All right. Lilith Asteroth, Kathryn Rifkin, Chris Foye, thank you very much for joining us today on the road to legalization. And tune in every couple of weeks. We'll have different guests, different points of view in each video podcast. So thanks for watching.